Kellerman, joined once again by Chael Sonnen. Chael, thank you for coming on the show again. Yes.
Wouldn't miss it. What's happening, Max?
Well, I mean, what's happening is Dillashaw and Sandhagen. But what I've learned doing these now for a couple weeks is you always start with Conor McGregor. Because the casuals want Conor McGregor, and the hardcore fans who claim in all the comments, they're talking about McGregor, actually also want to hear about Conor McGregor, if only to complain about it. So you said something on your podcast that I heard, and I thought, wait a minute, Chael's not considering this, okay? You were talking about the excuse Conor used after the fight. He never used excuses, always gracious, right? I think he uses an excuse now because his back is against the wall. He needs to remain marketable. His ego is really taking a hit because he was losing the fight again. But talking about the leg, here's something that I thought, wait, Chael's not considering this. He talks about a stress fracture in his leg, right? And I think you said something like, I have a stress fracture right now. Maybe, but your leg didn't just snap in half. The leg about which he is speaking snapped in half. And Chael, I don't know if you saw it, but I did not see an obvious place where that break would have happened. I didn't see him checked in such a way where I'm like, the break happened right there. I thought a couple times, maybe something in there, maybe something there. Didn't look devastating. The thing snapped in half, right? Like, how did it happen? So I think the stress fracture sounds to me to be plausible. Now, that doesn't explain why he was getting beaten up before the leg snapped, but I can buy it as an excuse as to why the leg snapped. Your response?
I buy that too. I mean, if he had a stress fracture, I would buy that too. I think my overarching message I was attempting to make was that it really doesn't matter what happened, right? Whether a guy feels good or he doesn't feel good going in, the contest is only contested over four things: the athletes, the weight class, and the unified rules at a specific time. If one of those four things, if the integrity of one of those four things is not brought into question, I don't doubt that he had a fracture. I just don't see how it would take away from the outcome. And moreover, Max, people are talking about a rematch and doing this a fourth time. Look, from a competitive architecture standpoint, there is nothing, historically speaking, that 5 minutes we saw warrants or should even make anybody want to see a rematch. That was a beating. We understand it. Move on. Okay.
Now let's get to what's coming up, Chael, because I'm very interested in this Dillashaw-Sandhagen fight. Dillashaw's been away for a couple of years, and Sandhagen, I forgot the adjective he used, but he said it was despicable or gross or something. I forgot what he said. He got caught using EPO. Dillashaw did. Now, you're someone who is no stranger to being busted for PEDs. What do you think, first, about why he was using in the first place, and then Sandhagen's reaction to him? If Sandhagen is saying that apparently he's a clean fighter, and obviously he hasn't been caught with anything, but he's really, feeling some kind of way about the fact that Dillashaw cheated the way he did. You have been on the other side of this. What is your comment?
Well, and not to mention, right, I mean, cheaters in many ways do win. TJ loses the belt. He sits out for a period of time, but he comes right back. I believe this is a number one contenders fight. That just makes sense. Dana White has not announced it, but I think that we can all agree as we look at the pieces on the board, the winner of Sandhagen versus Dillashaw is going to advance, not to mention it's a main event fight. Yeah. So you bring a guy like TJ, who was breaking the rules. Sure, he sat out for a little bit, but he's already back into a main event. And in theory, he's one win away from being back into a title fight. So I think that would frustrate the guys. And I do want to tell you, because you mentioned my use, I also used EPO. And Max, as far as performance enhancers go, EPO was my favorite. Some people, there's some enhancers that just flat don't work, but they're on the
stamina.
I will tell you. Max, put this
stamina in training, right? Chael, it's stamina in training, and that allows you to get farther in your training. It's why cyclists use it.
Absolutely. If you were to run 2 miles, the average viewer runs 2 miles. Let's say that took them 20 minutes. You don't do any kind of training. You don't prep at all, but you take a shot of EPO. You wait about 10 days. That's how long it takes for it to kick in. You go run that 2 miles. You will now do it in 16 minutes. Without any kind of training at all, just with this medicine. It does such a good job with your red blood cells of oxygenating the body, making you feel less tired. Yes, it's an incredible thing. And if TJ's going to lose it, which he is, he's no longer using it. Many people will tell you it's not just the physical effect, but you also have a psychological effect of, I can't do this without the candy, right? I'm here to tell you, both statements are true. TJ, it's good. It's going to be a challenge here. I know he's worked through it in training, but he's got some tests. He's got some things to prove on Saturday.
meantime, I think it's a really interesting styles matchup. And I know why Dillashaw is the underdog, because really activity is so important in the UFC, because you're rounding out your game, staying sharp, but also continuing to learn, as the other guy who's been on the shelf isn't. Not the same way. Not going through camps. It's not the same thing. But Dillashaw has multiple ways to win this. And they remind me on their feet of each other, in the sense that they're very active with their feet and positioning each other, trying to get to the outside so they have angles that the other guy doesn't. Sandhagen with a very active jab, and will also use his knees and all that. Dillashaw also, they're really thinking fighters, and they think very quickly on their feet when it comes to striking. But Dillashaw would seem to have the advantage on the ground, right? That gives him multiple ways to win, and yet he is the underdog here because of the inactivity. Is that analysis correct? Should he be the underdog?
I see it the same way as you do. The one time that Sandhagen has stubbed his toe, it was against Aljamain Sterling. Sandhagen was taken down, choked out, and the whole fight was over in about 40 seconds. It was shocking. This is Sandhagen, who's getting highlight reels over guys like Frankie Edgar, right? Legends of the sport that Sandhagen's beating and knocking out, but he does do it on his feet. It would seem as though the Division I college wrestling background of Dillashaw could be a real kryptonite. I have one thing to add for you, and this part of the story's never got out, and I don't know why another guy has told it. These guys used to train together. They were in Colorado in the same room. I don't know that they were teammates or if this was just a one-time workout. I can't confirm that, but it was pretty dominant, and it was very much favoring Sandhagen. And Team Dillashaw did not want this fight. I can tell you, as a voice in the sport, I was getting calls from the management of Dillashaw saying, stop talking about that. Steer us in a different direction. Look, Max, if I hadn't got that call, if I wasn't armed with that info, when I stand back and look at it, I think that Dillashaw beats him. I think that Dillashaw controls this. Something within the training session and the insiders that were there to see it, apparently the workout was different.
That's really interesting. And by the way, if you're training up in Colorado, it's double EPO. Like you're doing naturally what the EPO is doing artificially to your blood cells, training at altitude. And I really like watching both of these guys stand up games. They remind me of Lomachenko in boxing, the former lightweight champion. So the angles they create with their footwork, the way they think the game, the way they set opponents up. But as I mentioned, Dillashaw can also take it to the ground. You mentioned Aljamain Sterling. What do you like now? And what we have here now at bantamweight seems to be kind of an unofficial four-man tournament to crown a champion, right? Like Jan and Sterling, and now Dillashaw and Sandhagen. Who do you like between Sterling and Jan?
That's an interesting one, because Jan was controlling that match. Even though he cheated and got disqualified, we saw a meaningful amount of it. I saw Aljo getting tired. I saw fatigue kicking in, which is something that Aljo can address. He can recognize himself and work on in the gym to be a little bit different. I think you'll probably have a different contest now that they both felt each other and the mask is off. But for the minutes that we did see, Jan wasn't having that hard of a time. For the rounds that were completed, the judges were pretty unanimous that Jan was on his way to a decision. So, I think there's something special there. But moreover, I want to see who they fight next. I really do. I think more than Jan and Aljo, I wasn't excited for that fight the first time. I don't know that I'm jacked up for it the second time, particularly after I saw that Jan was kind of in a little bit different class. But you insert Sandhagen or even Dillashaw. I mean, if I was Dillashaw, every time I had a microphone this week doing media, I would talk about that I'm back to reclaim the title that I never lost. I would remind people I was the champion. It got stripped. Nobody ever beat me.
Yeah, that's a good point. And who do you think at this moment, if you had to guess, and it seems like there will be a kind of, at this moment, it looks like an unofficial tournament to crown a champion to me. Who's the best bantamweight in the world? Who would you guess?
I think that Jan is the guy to beat. I think that what he's done, aside from that disqualification, he only had one loss. His record off the top of my head is somewhere along 17-1. It's a very beautiful record, and he seems to keep on getting better. I know in practice he's very disciplined. I know his training partners say great things about him and his focus and his drive. He's a guy that wants to get better. He's stayed hungry, which is always hard for guys that make it to the top of the mountain. It's one reason they don't stay. From what I'm hearing, reputation-wise, he's still 26 years young. He's still got his best days in front of him.
Now, and are you picking because of the information you have and the activity, Sandhagen over Dillashaw? Like, what is your pick on that fight? I'm really looking forward to this. And me in boxing background, I love the stand-up game here, but Dillashaw seems to have more ways to win. It reminds me of the way Wonder Boy lost, right? A lot of people picking Wonder Boy because they like the Styles matchup, but it seemed to me he only had one way to win and, in fact, wound up losing against Burns, who had more than one way. In a way, it reminds me of that. Who do you like?
I'm taking Dillashaw. Even if TJ's own team thinks this is a bad matchup, I went and watched TJ train. I happened to be in San Diego and found out that he was doing a workout about 20 minutes from where I was. Look, he looked fantastic. Brian Ortega and Juan Archuleta were his workout partners. I mean, that's name dropping right there. Archuleta was the sitting Bellator champion. Ortega is the sitting #1 contender. I mean, I've never seen TJ look so good. And many guys, when they're on a layoff or coming off of PEDs, and they have that psychological effect, you see a massive decline. I can just tell you, within the workout room that day, TJ still looked like the best 35-pounder on earth.
Yeah, I can't wait for Saturday night. Chael, thank you for joining me today, as always. And you want to plug the podcast? Get plug something. You're coming on just on the solid. Why don't you plug something?
I appreciate that. You know what? I got a new show. It's on ESPN. It's called The Chael Sonnen Show. I really would appreciate it if somebody watched it, by the way. My ego is directly related to that number. So if somebody wants to do old Chael a favor, click the link button on ESPN+. Thank you, Max.
Click the link button on ESPN+, The Chael Sonnen Show. I can tell you, Chael can be talking about wallpaper. It's always entertaining. But I'm guessing you won't be talking about wallpaper. Thanks, Chael. Appreciate you, brother.
Appreciate you, pal.